Okay, there we go. Oh my gosh. What a way to start. Happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome to MoneyShift in the Morning. I am Thanasi, your host. Today we got a good bit about today we have a good amount of car news that we're going to be getting into, so I want to get started and get right into it. The first bit of news that we're talking about today, shout out to Michael Dion. Welcome, my man. Welcome, welcome, welcome. The first bit of news that I want to get into involves these photos right over here. Volvo had themselves a bit of an electric car day yesterday where they talked about a lot of news. Michael, you need more espresso. I know, my man. We got a half of one in the tank, but yeah, we definitely need more. You're totally right. Good call out there, Michael. Shout out to Steven as well. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So the first bit of news that we're talking about is Volvo. Volvo came out yesterday and talked about a lot of new electric car news and what their direction was. Now, for those of you watching that are like, you know what, I don't want this to be another electric car stream, let me just tell you, okay, this is the only electric car news that we're talking about today, and after this, every car that we're talking about has over 400 horsepower. There we go. Just to get that out of the way. Okay. So yesterday when Volvo was talking electric cars, they spoke about a couple things that I thought were pretty interesting. The first of which is what that range number has to be in order to get people in the door. So GM thinks that number is 300. General Motors thinks that if they produce electric cars with 300 miles of range, that is more than enough. Shout out to Dylan. Welcome, welcome. That is more than enough for the everyday person. They don't need more than that. So the number that GM is aiming for all of their electric vehicles, trucks, vans, whatever, is that 300 mile mark. Now, Volvo says that's not enough. Volvo says that's not even close. Volvo wants to break the 1,000 watt per liter energy density milestone, which means that they're looking for that 600 plus mile range number or 1,000 kilometers, because they think that that is the number that once people have 600 miles of range, they'll be good to go. There's no reason not to switch. Now, is that too much? Could you do well with the GM 300 figure, or is that not enough for you still? Do you want more than that? Me personally, 600 miles would be incredible. 600 miles allows me to charge less per week. 600 miles allows me to go further on what I have, right? That 1,000-mile road trip now needs one charge instead of three. That's the key there, right? Volvo is currently in the process of transitioning to an electric-only brand. Dylan says, give me 500 or nothing. Dylan says 300 is not flexible enough. IMO agreed. Michael says 600. I was thinking 400 would be the benchmark, although 600 on a road trip would be so badass. So 400 is your number. There you go. So 600 that Volvo is shooting for is over that. That's great. That's great. That's good info. Yeah, I hear you. So we got 500. We got 400. I think I'm with you guys. Around that 400 or 500 mile range is what I would really want out of an EV as opposed to a gas vehicle. So Volvo, as we know, is transitioning to an electric-only brand. And one of the things that Volvo is approaching is charging times, right? Volvo believes that current charging times are expected to be cut by almost half by mid-decade. And if we think about what that means time-wise, right now cars take about 30 to 50 minutes to charge to full, roughly, right? So if we can cut that down to 15 minutes to go from 5% charge to full, that's pretty incredible, especially when you have 600 miles of range on tap. So hopefully Volvo can achieve these goals that they're setting for themselves. But the last thing that they mentioned about their electric car technology is that they're offering a vehicle to grid where the car can provide power to the grid when it senses prices are high. Shout out to Dan DeVoe. Welcome, my man. So if you're charging your Volvo, if your Volvo's plugged in like this photo shows, okay, and Volvo senses through communication with the electric company that prices are high, it can also supply power, thus potentially netting you revenue, right? Or at the very least, offsetting the cost that you're incurring by charging your electric car should you not have something like a solar panel or something like that. So pretty interesting stuff from the fine folks at Volvo. But that's enough about electric cars. We've talked about them for 5.5 minutes, and we don't need to talk about them more in today's episode. We need to move on to a car that you guys might not have heard of, but I want you to know what it is. So this car right here, okay, this is the Dallara EXP. Now, this is the track-only variant of what is, and I'm going to say this, my actual dream car. So this is the track-only variant of my dream car, all right? Michael says, we will see large automotive manufacturers become an alternate power source for a home. Seems like the pathways are being kind of laid. Totally, Michael, you're spot on. It seems as though every single new electric car that is coming has vehicle-to-grid technology. So they have the potential to sort of stabilize the grid, right, and its peaks and valleys through drawing power from those vehicles. So you're spot on. Shout out to Ben Fortunati with the like. Welcome, my man. Welcome. We're doing a little bit of a later stream today. We're past that 9 o'clock hour. It's usually we'd be done by now. Usually you guys would have all the news, but I kind of like this slot. I'm going to be honest with you. Okay. Shout out to Ben Richardson as well. Welcome, my man. So the car that you guys are looking at is the race-only version of the Dallara Stradale, which is my freaking dream car. If you guys don't know what it is, it effectively is a super lightweight car. It's that green one there on the left. Super lightweight car that leverages the Focus RS engine, and it creates for an overall tremendous driving experience. Now, the Dallara EXP is what they could do if they had no rules, no regulations, nothing holding them back from creating the best track driving experience ever. Now, if you don't know who Dallara is, you gonna learn today, okay? Dallara is an aerodynamic manufacturer first. They've have the most wins in Indy 500 history. They also produce aerodynamics for LMP1 cars in Le Mans. They produce aerodynamics for rally cars. They produce aero for everyone. Dallara is one of the pinnacles when it comes to motorsports aerodynamics and just aerodynamics in general. Dallara is pretty crazy. Now, what you're looking at here is the Dallara EXP, and this thing is speedster only. And again, this is just for the track. This is not a street legal machine. So what are we looking at here in terms of power? What are we looking at in terms of performance? Buenos dias to you, Ben, as well. Hope you're doing well, my man. What you guys are looking at is a car that is powered by an engine that is relatively familiar. The engine that is powering the Dallara Stradale is a Ford Focus RS engine. So it's a 2.3-liter EcoBoost engine, but it makes a little bit more power than that Ford Focus. This thing makes 492 horsepower and 516 pound-feet of torque. Now, you guys might be saying, Thanasi, it's 2021, my man. 492, 516? That's not that much at all. I can buy a Dodge with 800 plus. Why are you so impressed with something that makes 500 horsepower? Because, yeah, let me tell you, okay? Let me read the rest of the details here. Let me help you, okay? This car uses a 6-speed sequential gearbox, Quaife limited slip differential, and it has a carbon fiber monocoque with a larger rear wing, new canards, bigger splitter over the road-going version. This car can generate 2,755 pounds of downforce at its top speed, which is important because this car weighs 1,962 pounds. So as the beat drops here, you begin to realize why this car is pretty special, right? You're looking at something that has 500 horsepower, 516 pound-feet of torque, and weighs under 2,000 pounds. This car generates so much downforce that it's capable of 2.7 lateral G, which is double that of a LaFerrari, double that of a Chiron, a Huayra, a hypercar, okay? It's just under that AMR Pro that we talked about this week that has a 3G capable. But this car's available now. You can get this thing today. And the cool thing about this, the thing that I think is the most interesting, is if you own the road-going variant to this car, you're a Dallara Stradale owner, okay? You can actually buy the parts off the EXP and interchange them. So let's say you want to take your Dallara Stradale to the track, swap out the bumper, swap out the trunk lid. Now you got all the aero from this car. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. Now there's no word on price, but the Dallara Stradale itself is a high $100,000 car. So we're probably looking at something upwards of 200K, closer to 3. But for a track-only vehicle that has the power to weight this does, for a track-only vehicle that has the immense aero that this does, which, by the way, we should expect nothing less from a company whose like bread and butter is aerodynamics, right? Pretty cool. Pretty impressive. And that Dallara Stradale, that green car right there, that's the dream right there. People ask me all the time, what's your realistic dream car? It's that guy. Now, I know like high 100s isn't crazy realistic, but when I say realistic, I mean something that like, you know, if you fucking push hard, you know what I mean? We get all those star donos in, I could take one home. You know what I mean? Just kidding. We're almost at 1,600 followers, not 16 million. Anyway, moving on to the next vehicle, and one of the things that is probably one of the more depressing announcements that we've had in MoneyShift history. I'll put it this way. Rumor has it that Chevrolet has canceled the newest version of the Camaro Z28 that is coming out to our shores. Now, this rumor particularly hurts because we learned what this car could be. Now, if you remember what the original Camaro Z28 was, this guy over here, it leveraged the C6Z06 engine, carbon ceramic rotors, magnetic ride suspension. This thing was legit. This thing was awesome. This thing was renowned by pretty much everyone that drove it as one of the better, if not the best track vehicle in recent history. Never mind something that came from an American automaker. So when we learn that the modern Z28 isn't coming out, that a new version, that a replay, if you will, of this car isn't coming, it's really sad because, well, we know what the next generation Corvette Z06 is using for an engine. Chevrolet canceled what would have probably been one of the best front-engine rear-wheel drive cars we ever would have seen. Why? Because the car would have used a 5.5-liter flat-plane crank V8 from the C8 Z06. That engine is likely to generate over 600 horsepower on its own, naturally aspirated. And what's worse, in the Camaro, it would have been offered with a manual transmission. And because the C8 Z06 is a C8 Corvette at its core, that car's not going to get a manual. So it would have been the only way we would have been able to get that flat plane crank V8, the only way we would have been able to get that 600 plus horsepower with a manual transmission. Now, it's rumored that it was canceled because of the botched update that saw a reduction in Camaro sales. When Camaro got a facelift recently, it wasn't well received, and their sales aren't looking so hot. And because of that, it was estimated that that is why we no longer have the Camaro Z28. But we're missing out on a car that is based on one of the best chassis you can get under $100,000. We're missing out on a car that is probably going to get one of the better motors that we would have seen on a vehicle under $100,000. We're missing out on what would have been one of the greatest rear-wheel drive manual cars under $100,000, and that's a big, big bummer. Now, Chevrolet tried to make up for that. They tried to do something, you know, interesting by releasing this. Now, I'm going to pause the music we're listening to because we got a little video. Chevrolet came out with this video in hopes to sort of, you know, make everything okay. Can I summarize the difference between the Z28 and the SS1LE? Yeah, totally, Michael, 100%. So when Chevrolet came out with the Z28 Camaro, that thing was, okay, what's the best way? I got you. Okay, all right. The 1LE Camaro, all right? No, it's actually, no, that's not the case. So Michael asks, is the SS1LE road course and the Z28 drag? No, they both were road course, but they did it with different engines, primarily. So when the Z28 first came out, it was in 2015, I believe. And the Z28 had a 7-liter aluminum V8 that made 505 horsepower, and it got that engine from the C6 Z06. The SS1LE leverages the same motor that is in the Camaro SS. So it doesn't have that sort of special engine. It has a 6.2-liter V8. Now, the SS1LE has evolved into a vehicle that's taken the Z28 space. But when they first launched, the biggest difference was that the 1LE had the 6.2-liter V8 from the Camaro, where the Z28 had a 7-liter V8 from the Corvette, and then the ZL1 had steel brakes, the Z28 had carbon ceramic brakes, etc., etc. So think about it as two vehicles with the same goal, but the Z28 was like the pinnacle of that goal. It had the best motor Chevrolet could offer at the time. It had the best brakes Chevrolet could offer at the time. So even though it had the same suspension, it had the widest tires Chevrolet could put on a Camaro at the time, right? So the ZL1 has since taken that spot because there's no Z28, but at the time that they coexisted, the Z28 was just that cut above, but they both had the same recipe. Does that make sense? I think so. It made sense in my head, but like we noted at the beginning of the podcast, I need more espresso. So if that didn't, just let me know and we can keep talking about it. All right, so let's go into a little video that Chevrolet released in hopes that, you know, you would sort of forget about the core Camaro news that we just talked about. 110%. Understand now. Thanks, man. No worries, Michael. That's what we're here for. So Chevrolet showed a video, 15 seconds long, of the 2022 Silverado ZR2. Let's take a watch. We're going to watch it one more time because it was 15 seconds long. And I'm going to stop and try to point out some things that are now obvious because of this. The suspension on this vehicle is the Multi-Matic multi-spool damper system. Or what's the specific, the exact name? Let me get the exact name. The exact name is Multi-Matic Dynamic Suspension Spool Valve Dampers, okay? So this has the same trick dampers from the Colorado ZR2 and from the majority of new Chevrolet products. All right, so other than that, we don't really get much. I'm going to be honest with you guys. Like, they didn't really show a lot of information, but we think we have a rough idea, or I think, excuse me, I keep saying we, but I think I have a rough idea as to what this thing is going to look like. Now, the first things first, this is an F-150 Raptor competitor at its core, okay? What this is looking to do, what this is looking to shoot for is the Raptor. So as a reminder, the F-150 Raptor at its core, the base Raptor, we're not talking about the R that's coming later, we're not talking about the TRX, we're talking about the Raptor. The Raptor has 450 horsepower, the Raptor has 510 pound-feet of torque, thanks to a twin-turbo 3.5-liter V6 EcoBoost from Ford. It has, you know, the crazy dampers. It's more of a Baja-ready truck. Now, that is what this Silverado ZR2 is going to be. I expect this thing to have locking diffs at both ends. I expect this thing to leverage the brand's 6.2-liter V8 to make upwards of 430 to 450 horsepower. Maybe they release another variant, like a ZR2 Bison or something like that, like they have for the Colorado, and that goes for the TRX with that crazy high horsepower number. But when this thing comes out, expect it to have in the 400s, as it's shooting for the Raptor first and the TRX second, because let's remember, the Raptor is the proven vehicle with sales. The TRX isn't just yet. Right? The Raptor is the one that set the tone for this space. The Raptor is the one that is the reason the TRX exists. The Raptor is the reason this exists. So this is going to be shooting for the base Raptor first, with a potential for a turbo version that nets us in the TRX category later. Expect this car to come later this year and expected to do battle with the Raptor. Michael says, drop in the LT4 from the C7Z06 ZL1. Yeah, totally. 640 horsepower, while down on the TRX, would be more than enough to be a part of that conversation. So I'm with you, Michael. I think that's a great idea. So with that, let's do a quick summary of today's news, and then we'll set you guys on your way. Friday is almost here, friends. Happy Thursday. Happy 1st of July. Hope everyone's going to have an awesome weekend. Okay, the first bit of news that we talked about comes by way of Volvo. Volvo had themselves an electric car day yesterday, and they announced that they're shooting for that 600-plus mile mark in terms of range. They expect current charging times to be halved, and they will provide a vehicle-to-grid technology where it can provide power to the power grid when prices are high, netting you more revenue and offsetting the costs of charging this vehicle at home. Now, the next vehicle we talked about is a track-only variant of the Dallara Stradale. This is the Dallara EXP. Now, this car leverages the EcoBoost 2.3-liter out of the Focus RS, but makes 492 horsepower and 516 pound-feet of torque. That engine is mated to a 6-speed sequential gearbox and a Quaife limited slip differential. And thanks to that carbon fiber monocoque, this thing weighs 1,962 pounds. Now, it wouldn't be a Dallara if it didn't have an updated aero package. Thanks to a larger rear wing, newer canards, and a bigger splitter, this thing could generate 2,755 pounds of downforce at its top speed, which is almost 1,000 pounds more than this car weighs. This thing can pull 2.7 lateral G, which is about double what a hypercar can make. Pretty insane. Now we have the saddest news of the day with Chevrolet. Chevrolet has rumored to announce that the Camaro Z28 will not receive a modern iteration. Now, as a reminder, what this generation Camaro Z28 was it was the ultimate Camaro for the track. It borrowed the engine from the Corvette, placed it in the chassis of the Camaro, and created for a batshit crazy machine. Now, if that same recipe were to come back, we'd be looking at a 5.5-liter flat plane crank V8 from the C8Z06 that would generate upwards of 600 horsepower and be offered with a manual transmission. Now, apparently it was canceled due to slow sales of the Camaro, which is a huge drag because we're missing out on what probably would have been the best rear-wheel drive car in the modern day era. I'm going to say it. And the last vehicle that we talked about is the Silverado ZR2. Now, the Silverado ZR2 is a Multimatic dynamic suspension, spool valve damper, locking diff, having 6.2-liter V8 drive-in pickup truck that is meant to do battle with the F-150 Raptor, and do battle it will. I'm excited to see it go down. But with that, you guys have all the information you need to be up to speed on today's automotive car news. It may be Friday for Ben, but it's Thursday for the rest of us. Have an awesome day, everybody, and I will see you